Hey everyone, thanks for hosting. And yeah, the pro tip, if you want to get listed in the conferences, submit while you still work at a big tech and then jump the ship. This is the easiest way. Yeah, so we're gonna chat about shipping fast. You know, that's the name of the game. That's sort of helps us to get our ideas in the world faster. And you know, this is sort of what I think of myself when I'm working. Reality, you know, when you're in big tech, you're sort of like a bit more of that. And if you think that, you know, I understand that. It's a bit offensive, but I understand that. That's me over there. And these days, it's more of that, you know. I'm just working all by myself, and I get to move my desk around. Wonderful, very exciting. So this talk is going to be a bunch of stories from, you know, I worked at Meta for almost 9 years, and there were many sort of tips and tricks that I learned from very knowledgeable people. And I just want to share them with you, and hopefully some of them are going to be applicable to your daily work, and you will be able to take them away and sort of improve your shipping speed. So a bit of a brag. This was the message that was sent from like one of the VPs when I worked at Meta, where they were like, "Oh, how many people are working on this thing?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just me." And they were like, "Well, carry on then." And so the tricky part is always to, you know, to get products faster than people expect them, you know, to be shipped. So we're going to chat about a few things today. We're going to talk about tech choices, some team collaboration stuff, risks that might come when you know, ship software, comes with some risks, and just some wrap-up wisdom. Yeah, so let's start with tech choices. And so we gonna start by chatting about the app that I helped to build called Threads. Meta decided to build their response to Twitter at some point, and I was brought on to the project pretty early on, and we were thinking about how do we bootstrap this new, the new sort of product. There were many choices that we could have made. On iOS, we decided to go with Instagram app as the foundation. We sort of built it on top of it. Fun fact, I just took Instagram app, threw out the pictures, blew up the text, and that was like literally the first version. And many, many things started crashing and failing because turns out backend that's built to host photos expects photos. And when you just send a text post, like a lot of things break. But the technical choice that we had to make there was, do we build it on top of existing app, or do we start from scratch? What technology do we use? And so I proposed to use UIKit because that's what Instagram was using. And you know, we evaluated Swift UI, but we had this massive code base, and we just decided to go with what was already there. And on iOS, it actually allowed us to ship something in almost no time. So on day one, we had an app that was hitting backend and getting sort of stuff going. So saying that, you know, so Swift UI is obviously way, way faster when you sort of iterate on the UI, but probably we all hit, you know, those cases when we build some sort of UI, and then eventually you run into this corner, and you're like, well, great, now I have to rewrite half of the feature in UIKit just because something doesn't work. So for us, that was sort of the trade-off. Saying that, my friend who was building Android app built it using Compose, which is this sort of Swift UI-like story on Android, and built it from scratch. So build it in the same time, you know, with slightly different trade-offs. So this is all to say that technology that you know, that you're familiar with, is probably the fastest, especially when you're in the time crunch, because you will end up hitting a lot of snags along the way, and like it's just easier to resolve. So, you know, for me, the lesson is that when you know your tools, you're faster, right? So like a lot of engineers at Meta still don't really know Swift UI because we haven't used it that widely. I think like around the time when I was leaving, adoption started going up a bit. Unsurprisingly, Meta has its own version of like sort of declarative UI frameworks on iOS because it started way before Swift existed. It was written in Objective-C++. called Component Kit, but that's a different story. So yeah, I think that just pick the technology that's fastest, that you're familiar with, whatever this is for you, and you're probably going to move way faster than whatever the new flashy thing is on Hacker News or whatever. So then I was also brought onto Meta AI team to help to build a bunch of sort of products wrapped into like product experiences with AI. So all sort of text to image generation products and many other things. So I was in charge of building the actual framework that was sort of underpinning the whole thing so that any team can build those products faster. And I also built text to image product on top of this. So it needed to happen in like something like 2 months. So in Meta timeline, it's pretty fast. And so basically I ended up building a lot of quick and dirty prototypes that allowed me to stand up this stack and distribute the work across all the teams pretty quickly. The tricky part is that when you stand up stacks quickly, we've probably all been there, you cannot always predict all the possible consequences of that, of the architecture and sort of the trade-offs that's going to be made. So what ended up happening is that there were a bunch of known hacks and escape hatches that I built just to sort of enable other teams to be building with on top of the solution. And obviously, when so many people build on top of your stuff, they end up discovering those. So fun fact, if you crack open UIKit or AppKit, you will find a lot of hard-coded bundle identifiers of like existing apps that Apple special casing behaviors for, because they know that there are apps out there that rely on some quirks of the previous versions of UIKits and whatever else. And so they have to accommodate for that. So I faced the same problem when people discovered some quirks of my solution because it was such a race to the finish line. People started abusing them. And so it took a long time to sort of take them out later. So you should embrace disposable code. Disposable code is good. But you should also take into account that you will have to migrate and push people forward to the next, iteration once you move there. So this is something that it's a trade-off that comes with fast sort of iteration speed. Yeah, so just clean up regularly and sort of make sure to move this along. The next one is, I sort of like this example. I worked on this team called Control Labs. So it's a startup that Facebook acquired back in the day, Meta. And it's basically this bracelet that reads your muscle impulses, and it allows you to reconstruct the gesture that your hand is performing. Really helpful when you want to interact with objects that are not really there, so like virtual reality, augmented reality, when you don't have like a slab of glass to tap. Apple went with sort of hand posture sort of recognition, but it's not always possible when you have occlusion or when your hands are not in the field of vision of the device. So anyway, so we went with this, we're building a lot of experiences for this technology, and so what you can see right now on the screen is a demo that we built quite a few years ago, and it got shipped in a product that was demoed recently, actually, I think called Orion. And the demo is basically you can write on any surface. So like you can write on the wall, on your leg, on whatever, and just by the virtue of having this bracelet reading your electromagnetic impulses, it can recognize what you're writing, and it can reconstruct the actual letters. And you can see here, we built this demo experience where we get the signals from the device, and we reconstruct it, and it goes into the actual product experience. When we were building it, the model that was reconstructing what you're writing was not generalized yet. And so it means that it worked really well for the person who trained it, but it didn't work for anyone else. So that was a bit of a problem. It's a pretty standard process of how models being developed, but it wasn't ready then. And we still needed to build this experience, right? So like, what do you do? People on the team taught me this wonderful trick called time machine. And it's basically, imagine that you already have this technology generalized, that it works for everyone. Replace it with something that actually does it today. And so what we did, I took pretty much standard iPhone. I took, I think it was Google ML SDK at the time that does handwriting recognition. You can find it today. It's like broadly available. And I basically built an app that turned your phone into a full screen sort of stylus-like experience when you just write with your finger on your phone and it recognizes it. And we used the same protocol that this bracelet used, and we sort of recognized the characters and we sent it up into the, we used, I think, Microsoft HoloLens as a vehicle for this demo. And so we would send the recognized text into the device. So basically, we pretended that we already have this model ready, that it's good to go. And yeah, basically just sending the output there. One person had a great insight of using those running straps for the phones that people use to strap the phone when they run, and just put it on your leg and sort of twist it sideways. And so you can actually pretend that, you know, test the whole experience without actually having the model working quite yet. So this seems a bit far removed from our daily iOS sort of tasks. But the lesson here was that, you know, take a piece of technology that doesn't work for you yet, and it can be server, it can be something that's still not implemented by your teammates or whatever. Try to replace it. Have like a static JSON that mocks data. Have whatever that doesn't distract users from the actual experience. And it will let you test the entire experience end to end way before individual parts are ready, or if some parts take a while. Yeah, so basically just mock it out. The next one is actually near and dear to my heart, and it's building tools. There are two examples here. I will talk about the left one first and then the right one. So left one is from back in the day when Facebook app was just migrating to support dark mode. We read a lot of snarky comments online where people were like, oh, there's just that checkbox in Xcode that you have turned on, and your app is dark mode ready. And we're like, oh, cool, we just never saw that. Reality is that when I was working on this project, I started sort of migrating Facebook app. And aside from the fact that it's massive, we found that we have, I think, like 9 or 10 different ways of hard coding colors. Some of them strings that come from server. Any way that you can think of hard coding color, we had it. And needless to say, you have so many call sites, and it was just impossible to even draw people's attention to this problem. So what we ended up building was a so-called pink mode, not dark mode, but pink mode, where you have this toggle in the internal settings, and through some swizzling, it turns all the colors that are not dark mode compliant into this like awful magenta color, right? And so it immediately drew attention of all the like VPs and whatever, and people on the teams to like, oh, this is like really crap, and we really need to fix. So this is a great way to surface and to bring urgency to problems that you find in the app by just building tools, right? So like internal tools, external tools, whatever. The one on the right is sort of near and dear to me, especially we have this internal kind of like Chrome DevTools sort of tool for iOS that allows you to explore app as it runs, sort of similar to what Xcode has built in, but it does it slightly differently, and it does it without pausing, you know, your app every time. So we noticed that we have a really sort of ongoing large volume of accessibility issues across different apps. And so I think that specific tool was built when I was working on Threads. We had to release it really quickly, and so accessibility wasn't nearly as good as it should have been. And so I added a mode to this tool that we have called Sonar. I think it's the external name too. It's open source. And so I added the mode to it that basically looks at your app as if the voiceover mode is on. And it just reads all the containers that VoiceOver would read, and it sort of like creates it, you know, puts it in the app. And you can see in that video that it creates containers. It sort of annotates them, like what would be a button, what would be a label, and it's really easy to see all of a sudden where your accessibility comes short. And so if you think about it today, we have this tool, Accessibility Inspector, right? But there you need to launch your simulator, you need to tap around, and it tells you what are you tapping on, right? It's possible that something changed and I just didn't catch up with the latest in the industry, but to me this is a very weird way to like bring awareness of accessibility, where you literally imagine that you would need to like tap every element in Chrome to actually know what is there instead of seeing the entire hierarchy, right? This is just silly. I think actually there is an external tool called, I'm blanking on the name, there is a tool that does all sort of UI exploration, developer tool. that has a similar mode as your app is running. So it's a really helpful way to just discover accessibility issues. So yeah, the lesson here was that you just build tools, and through that you accelerate not only yourself, you discover issues faster, but you also help so many people around you on different teams to build features faster. Up to the very last day when I left Meta, once every few months someone would message me about the accessibility tool and said like, oh, that was really helpful when I had to hunt down this like random accessibility bug. So like, thank you for building. Yeah, so tools are great. The next one is tests. I'm sure that everyone loves tests, right? At Meta, we had this internal group that would share test plans on the pull requests that caused site outages. And you can see from some of the examples that they're quite sketch. My favorite is just shruggy. That's like YOLO. I think that tests are helpful in some circumstances, but when you're rapidly iterating on the product without finalized product definition, it's not always actually helpful. So unless you're building some sort of reusable infrastructure or some mission-critical piece of, I don't know, authentication, whatever, my take is wait with testing until it stabilizes. In my experience, it causes a lot of churn if you actually focus on the testing first. But then, to be fair, as a counter-argument, when I was building Threads, having Instagram app so well tested prevented me from landing so much clowny code that it's just ridiculous. Because it was so well tested, it helped me to move faster. But Threads itself was iterating too rapidly, and until the product itself sort of stabilized, it felt like introducing testing was just slowing us down because you have to fix and update them every single time. So this one is more about exercise your judgment, Yeah, so choose where to test. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's slowing you down. Yeah, so moving away from technology into the domain of sort of what's in between keyboard and the chair. So like people who actually write code. There is a lot that we can learn to work better, and it doesn't matter if it's a big team or a small team or just you by yourself. So the first one is also from Threads. There was this component that we needed to build, the pull to refresh component. It had this really cool animation, and it actually got a lot of good press for like attention to details. At some point, I picked up this component, and the designer who sort of came up with this idea was based in LA at the time, and I was based in London at the time. And so we had 1 hour overlap in our working day. And so the problem with me picking up this component ended up being that I built some sort of version. I get this version over to the designer. They wake up, they see it, and then by the time I go to sleep, they comment on it, and they end up, our iteration cycle would be like 1 to 2 days on every single comment, on every single new version, which is just ridiculous. It ended up being a big enough problem that I just handed it off to someone who was closer to their time zone. And I should have noticed it way sooner. It was my fault for not seeing that sooner. But basically, if you can create faster feedback loop, like sit next to a person who wants something to be done and make sure that they can see it as quickly as possible and give you comments, feedback on the stuff as quickly as possible. Those are probably obvious things in retrospect, but sometimes it's hard to spot it in the moment. Time zones is a big issue. I chatted with a few folks during the conference, and many people work across time zones. We all have our own ways of dealing with that, but be mindful of that and try to spot that. Yeah, so this one is sort of tricky. Also Threads example, we needed to ship it in a really limited time, and we basically had to say, what are we going to ship as a feature set for the very first version, right? And so you have constrained time, constrained number of people, and sort of product that you need to ship. So at some point, you just have to say, okay, we're not going to have we didn't have GIF picker, for the first version, which is like outrageous for a social network, right? Like, how would you even? But yeah, a lot of decisions came down to just saying, okay, we're gonna have to either down scope or to get more people, which is like at that point is impossible. It's like this story about 9 women delivering a baby in 1 month. It's like it's not something that just happens this way, or just sort of be able to stage features and sort of roll them out later. So I think that's sort of in the order of how little it would require from you. You either prioritize, so you say like, oh, we're just not gonna. This is not a feature that we're gonna work on, or you have staged rollouts, or the least ideal when you have to do that, but it's still helpful for the overall project. Disagree and commit. So make it known that you're not cool with that, but like at some point you just have to say that, okay, that for greater good, this is what we're gonna do. Yeah. So yeah, this is sort of like the same story. Risk mitigation. So there are a lot of ways when we actually build products, we can make sure that unknowns become known sooner and that we learn from our failures cheaper. So this is a really fun project I worked on. So Instagram at some point was experimenting with blockchain, like all teenagers. And so this is the CEO of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, who gave a TED Talk where he said that the future of creators is on blockchain. Not a single platform, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, would own the connection between creators and followers. So like, conceptually, I find it a very compelling story because people who sort of pour their livelihood into like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, they don't want to be, wake up one morning just to find out that like the platform banned them. So that was sort of addressing the story. I was brought on the project to figure out what exactly does this TED Talk mean for the actual product. And the most interesting part here was actually not even engineering, and I needed to build a bunch of engineering prototypes to like de-risk some things, work with other people to understand the technology a bit better. The most interesting thing here was that in order for this future to be sort of successful, we needed to figure out how to work with partners. So Google, Spotify, Shopify, and others, we sort of reached out to a few companies and we tried to understand how can we build this product so that it actually works across different platforms. And it was really interesting for me because as an engineer, I don't know about you, but I don't get to work on business sort of problems too often. And that was a really fun way to sort of stretch in the directions that you don't get to too often. Also, it was like sort of different platforms with very different financial incentives, ads, subscriptions, some sort of fees for merchants, whatever. All sort of really interesting stuff. If you're into that sort of, getting out of your comfort zone, this is really interesting. But the key point here is that this was the crucial piece in this product to be successful. Without understanding how those different platforms would actually recognize this new standard and sort of work together, all the engineering would be waste, right? It would be just useless. So I think the lesson here is that you need to identify those most critical pieces in your product pretty early and sort of address them head on, right? So like it's no good to spend all the time into engineering just to learn that like, well, no one wants to support because no one understands like the business side of the story, whatever it is in your case. Yeah. Right. So this one is about prototyping really, really, really fast. So this video shows an example of how when I needed to build a prototype of something in Instagram, I didn't really want to build a ton of Instagram, for how sort of fast and scalable and yada yada the code base is, it's always faster to build something from scratch, something really quick. And here I'm showing an example of how to put together a really, really simple sort of fake Instagram app where you just take a bunch of screenshots and you sort of toggle, you make them toggle between the tab bars until you get to the place where you actually want to build your prototype. So I've done a lot of work this way where I would set up a prototype outside of the code base, let people play with it, again, without sort of trying to identify the piece that gets to the essence of the experience that you want to show. And yeah, basically just let people play with it And then when you see the value, then you sort of take the hit of integrating it back into the main app, right? So otherwise, you just spend all this needless time building it in your infrastructure and like whatever. It just takes a while. So this is one way you can do that. There are many other ways, but just find whatever it is the cheapest way for you to give people the experience that you kind of want them to have without taking on unnecessary costs of the thing. Yeah, this is basically it. This is actually a really good book that I highly, highly recommend, and this is about how to test hypotheses without writing a single line of code at all. So this is about how to ask questions that allow you to answer, that allow you to get the answers that you want. Oftentimes when we come with hypotheses, with ideas to our friends, you sort of get this answer of like, oh, this is great, this is wonderful, of course I would use it. And so this book goes a lot into how to do that. And it's called Mom Test because whenever you come to a mom and you show like, Mom, I'm working on this thing, she's like, oh, that's wonderful, just wonderful. And then you go bankrupt. And so like that's a problem. Trust your moms. Yeah, so good book, definitely give it a read. Yeah, and so there are many ways you can actually test your assumptions without code. And so a lot of services, apps, whatever, they did many sort of different tricks to get those answers sooner. So it ranges from, inviting your friends and giving you some sort of incentive. So PayPal, I think, got really big by giving you free money, basically, for inviting friends. And that allows them to onboard way more people and sort of through that get more traction. Same thing was with Gmail. It was like invite-based type of thing. Many other products did the same. At Meta, we even did, in some like low-stake sort of scenarios, we would do some sort of like really, for example, you can place a button, and then when you tap the button, it says like, oh, this feature is still under construction. Thank you for your interest. We're going to send you a push notification when it's ready. So at least you can gauge if people care about it enough, so you get some ballpark estimate. So find a way to engage with your users, whether it's just by chatting, by talking to them, see the previous book, or whether it's sort of some sort of interesting referral sort of dynamics, and yeah, get them sort of on board sooner. So the next one, I cannot show you the exact video of what I built because it's internal to Meta, but it is about Control Labs thing again. So this video shows basically a walkthrough, like what does it do, and one thing that you can see through all the examples that you can see in this video is that the experiences that people have with this tool at the time, with this sort of bracelet, they were not something that you would do every moment of your waking life, right? Like you wouldn't really like control a massive spider with this thing or like play a game or whatever. So, but that means a lot of sort of things. For example, if you build a new model that you want to test on this thing and to see if it's better or worse, it takes a while. You need to bring people onto the research sessions. You need to or play with it yourself, dedicate some time, et cetera, et cetera. So not the fastest way to get response to whether your model is good. And so what I ended up doing, I built a sort of tool that connected this bracelet to a software that ran on the Mac. And it basically allowed you to control Mac, there was control with like a D-pad gesture that would control the cursor. There was another control that would sort of zoom in, zoom out. And then you can do the keyboard, right? So basically, the whole story here would be that you have a way to do your daily tasks with this bracelet and get a good read on the quality of the model. And this is how we learned that, well, battery life was just like a massive issue at the time because we suddenly started using it way more, right? So find whichever it is a way for you, for your app, to be using it way more often. Find it and get your users to do that. Dogfooding sessions are good. You can have bring people on and sort of like I don't know, pay them, give them stickers, swag, whatever, to just play with the stuff. Like as long as you can get them to play with your stuff and get more data, this is good. Yeah, okay, we're gonna skip that. So this is a you can tell that it's a bit dated. So the year was 2017, maybe. And the question of why we didn't have double tap to like Facebook story would come up way too often, and I was like, that's okay, I'll just build it. And so there was a designer who had a prototype. I took the prototype, I built it into Facebook feed. And the way we would do that is the way we would sort of test this kind of things. We would like roll them out to a small percentage, see how it performs, and then roll them out to more and more. When I rolled it out, I got a ping from an engineer like next day, and they were like, "Oh, did you release any features recently?" And I knew that he knows that I did, right? Like otherwise, why? Engineer was from the ads corner of the universe, and I was like, yeah, I did. They're like, yeah, cool, we're seeing massive regression in ads, in the money coming in with your thing. And so it turned out that I messed up, and clicks on the ads everywhere. Luckily, it was rolled out to a very small percentage, and they see it dip immediately, right, because of the scale, like 1% of the users is like still massive. And so we ended up scaling it back, and I saw that we might have lost more than my salary, but who knows. And yeah, so the key point here is try to make sure that you measure things that are important to you. Try to make sure that you gate things that are important to you, and that you can switch them off from afar. The feature flags the feature flag system that Meta has is one of my favorite things about like rolling out experiments there, is that you can like remote kill a lot of things, and that's super valuable. Also, I know that in Apple community there is sort of like a bit of a disdain to use analytics. It doesn't have to be sort of to violate privacy of your users. You can choose what you want to record, but my broader take is that if you don't measure key metrics for your product, you're sort of flying blind, and it's really hard to tell, if you're just going off of vibes and sort of like anecdotal feedback from your friends at this point. So try to avoid that. Yeah, so I think those are roughly like, this is a really quick run through the bunch of lessons that I sort of accumulated through the years. So when it comes to tech choices, identify the fastest technology. Try to unblock your teammates as quickly as possible with like whatever temporary hacks, as long as you like push them along and don't keep them around for too long. Time machine is again one of my favorite tricks to like replace pieces that are not ready, as long as it allows you to experience the rest of the important sort of part. Testing. For the team dynamics, yeah, like make sure that you have the tightest feedback loop, possible. Prioritize ruthlessly. Make sure to stage rollout. Make sure that communication is good. Like all the obvious stuff. Yeah, and then risk mitigation. Identify the riskiest part of the project first. It's again, all of this hopefully sounds obvious, but not sort of identifying the riskiest part first means that you're working on what you like to work and not what's important. So try to sort of disambiguate those. Prototyping in standalone environments can move you way faster. Try to align whether you even need to build things. Sometimes you don't. Make sure to incentivize dogfooding. Bring people early, bring people often. And finally, gate your work. Be sure to have an ability to kill something from afar. Yeah, and I hope that that's helpful, and that will allow you to ship your next projects way faster. Thank you so much.